Hi, I'm delighted to be joined by Andrew and Charlotte to talk about the ESG issues facing financial services organisations and what that means from a tax perspective. Welcome. So, first question to you, Charlotte. What are the key ESG drivers affecting the sector?
The key ESG drivers that are impacting the financial services sector is actually around how they are addressing the risks, for example, climate, nature, but also how they are identifying opportunities in terms of service and product design. And I think amidst all of that, the other drivers is around mandatory reporting and disclosures that have to be made. And for the financial services sector, it's quite voluminous and also imminent, I would say, in terms of ESG drivers.
And Andrew, what does this mean for the tax function? What should tax leaders be thinking about?
I think a tax leader really needs to be sort of actively involved in helping their organisation set their ESG reporting strategy. You talked about all the different standards that are coming down the road. Tax needs to be actively involved in that. You know, there are specific tax standards that will apply imminently. And then there are key tax principles that underpin broader sustainability reporting frameworks, which will be missed, I think, if a tax leader is not sort of actively involved in helping their organisation set that strategy. And then they also need to be thinking about where does their voluntary tax transparency reporting fit in to that reporting strategy. So there's a lot on their agenda.
Okay. So picking up on the regulation piece, Charlotte, what regulations are coming down the line? What's the future going to look like?
So there are a lot of regulations coming down the line with a lot of acronyms that would shame the line of duty TV program. And I think that these regulations, they are requiring very specific mandatory disclosures. And actually one of them are already published by the International Sustainability Standards Board, and that's the IFRS Sustainability Disclosure Standards. Europe also has its own set of standards. So at present, in terms of what is coming down the track, if we look at it from tax point of view, there isn't a specific standard that is dedicated to tax by either one of this framework. But both standard setters have said that they would look to the Global Reporting Initiative, which does have tax as one of its standards. So I guess what would come down the track is there will be more rules and regulations governing the disclosures and reporting, and also that one would need to consider whether tax would be included in the assessment of those requirements.
You got anything you want to add, Andrew?
Yeah, absolutely. So already there are tax standards that apply specific to tax reporting, such as EU country-by-country reporting being enacted right now, so firms need to get ready for that straight away. There's also a parallel set of obligations in Australia, so most global businesses will be caught by one or both of those obligations. And then I agree with you, Charlotte, that in the longer term, I think we need to get ready for tax reporting to be incorporated much more explicitly into sustainability reporting. But even before that comes, I think a tax leader needs to think about what are the tax principles that underpin existing reporting frameworks and how do they add value to their organisation's reporting strategy.
So next question, what do you think, Charlotte, are the biggest challenges and opportunities facing the sector?
So I think because of all these mandatory rules, both current and future, that are coming down the track, I think it's important for organisations, certainly the financial sectors, to try to harmonise all these requirements, or if you want to look for a cooler word, align all these requirements to optimise their implementation of those requirements. And I think it's also important for a lot of our clients to look at those requirements using certain lenses. And I believe the tax lens is an important lens to look at, both from addressing the risk as well as identifying opportunities, because those standards do require you to identify opportunities.
In your perspectives, Andrew?
I agree with everything you've said, but let me add another layer. So in financial services, you need to think not only about your corporate reporting standards, but all the reporting obligations you have on the products that you issue and that are badged as being sustainable products. So, the sustainable finance reporting obligations in the European Union, as an example. There's some tax principles that underpin that. And then I think tax leaders also need to be thinking about, well, how are they going to help their organization assess the ESG risk in their clients, their customers, and their counterparties. And already we're seeing tax as part of that theme, particularly in investment management, where you see investment managers looking at investee companies and assessing their approach to tax risk and tax transparency as part of their overall sort of ESG ratings.
Thank you. A final question to you, Andrew. What should a tax leader in financial services have at the top of their ESG to-do list?
So let's move on from reporting and some of these mandatory standards. I think at the top of that list should be, how do they, as a tax leader, add value to their organization, just in terms of the ESG strategy, but also that transition to net zero. And I think that's really centers around, what are the tax incentives and grants that are available to support that transition to net zero in every jurisdiction in which they operate. They need to have a handle on that. But I think more broadly, they need to think about, well, how does that impact their customers, their clients, their counterparties, and what role should a financial services organization have in designing products that support that transition to net zero, and where does tax fit into that? That's a key value driver, should be at the top of the agenda.
Perfect. Thank you, Charlotte, Andrew, for joining me today. A couple of key themes resonated with me: alphabet soup of regulation and the important role tax can play in adding value both to the organisation itself but to the client base. So thank you again.